My goal in this segment is to show you the power contained within the Trap Exercises add-on. I will do this by showing you the process I went through to create a trap learning sequence. My goal was to take an inexperienced shooter and in a very short time bring his or her skills up to the level of a 90-plus shooter. It was my intention to show that it is quite possible for a very inexperienced shooter to consistently shoot scores in the 90s with only 5 weeks of training. I hope that some of you who watch this video will begin to think about other ways to bring shooters quickly to higher skill levels. It is my belief that we are just in the beginning stages of changing how shotgun sports can be taught. Previous shotgun instructors have always been limited by what can be seen outdoors. Are you aware that before the year 2000, when dry fire came on the scene, the most difficult sport in the world to learn was shotgunning? There were 2 reasons for this. First, shotgunning provides less feedback than any other sport, and therefore it is very difficult to know what to do differently because you learn so little from the previous shot. In fact, when you shoot, you only see 3 conditions. You missed the target broke 2 to 10 pieces, or the target was turned into dust. If you miss the target, you have no evidence that will tell you the relationship between the center of your pattern and the center of the clay. Therefore, any correction you try to make is just a guess. If you broke the target, you have no evidence to tell you how close the center of your pattern was to the center of the clay. If the target turned to dust, you know the center of your pattern was very close to the center of the clay. Second, the speed at which you must learn to shoot is very fast, 7 to 9/10 of a second. It simply can't be done with your conscious mind, and yet your subconscious mind must learn from the conscious mind. How do you solve this dilemma? Dry fire thinks the answer is by learning in slow motion. You can't slow down the real world, but you sure can slow down the world of dry fire. So dry fire provides a solution for both problems. It provides great feedback and uses slow motion in the early learning process. The beauty of dry fire is while operating in slow motion, you get great feedback with every shot, and the Trap Exercise software allows you to create a training plan customized to your needs. Let me ask you a question based upon the following information. On Station 1, your biggest problem is a hard left. Would it make more sense to shoot on Station 1 with the oscillator on, turn the oscillator off and position the trap to throw all hard lefts, or 80% of the time throw hard lefts with 10% of the targets being hard rights and 10% of the targets being straightaways? The obvious answer is 80% hard lefts with some other targets to keep you honest. Now we are getting into the heart of what the Trap Exercise software is all about. You have control over many things. You can control the target angles in 2 ways. First, you could select one specific angle, or 2, or 3, or as many as 10. Or you can specify a wedge of angles. You might want to launch any target from 10 degrees to the left of center to 15 degrees to the right of center. And would you like to have control over the wind speed and direction so you can actually learn how to shoot in the wind? Do you have a shooter who calls pull and begins moving their gun even before they see it? We solve this problem by giving you a target release delay option from 0 to 5 seconds. And if the shooter moves his or her gun 5 seconds before the target becomes visible, it's pretty obvious. Finally, in Trap Exercises, you get to determine what criteria it takes to break a target. You actually set the parameters that decide if the target breaks. You might ask why I would want to do that. Because pattern density decreases as distance increases, it is impossible to break 100% of targets beyond 33 yards. This is clearly revealed in Dr. Jones's book entitled Sporting Shotgun Performance. Therefore, you will probably want to learn to break all your targets before 33 yards. This is what it takes to break 100% of the targets. Use a full choke. Use 1 1/8 ounce of number 8.5 shot. Break the target 26 to 33 yards from the muzzle of your gun with a pointing accuracy of 7.5 inches. So in trap exercises, I set the distance criteria for not less than 26 yards or more than 33 yards. The second thing I will specify is your pointing accuracy. I like to start a new shooter out with a 20-inch accuracy. With the 26 to 33 yard limit on distance and a 20-inch accuracy, the new shooter in the beginning is paying more attention to getting the shot off by 33 yards than their accuracy. However, as the shooter realizes getting the shot off by 33 yards isn't that hard at slower speeds, he or she begins to focus on accuracy while maintaining their timing. The ultimate goal in terms of pointing accuracy is 7.5 inches. So as the new shooter's accuracy improves, you tighten the accuracy requirements. I suggest starting at 20 inches and then moving to 17.5 inches, then to 15.0 inches. Continue doing this until you arrive at 7.5 inches, which is the goal, perfection. With that background, I'm ready to show you how I built 90 Plus. Using just 5 daily lessons, I labeled them Day 1, Day 2, Day 3, Day 4, and Day 5. Each day consisted of 8 25 target exercises. We will now look at the progression built into the daily lessons. I very much believe in progressive learning. The concept employed in 90 Plus is that for 1 week you're going to work on one station. So therefore, this particular sheet of paper depicts Day 1's activity irregardless of whether you're practicing station 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 targets. I normally started on station number 4, finding it moderately easy, not the most difficult, not the easiest. Now, what did I control on Day 1? I controlled the target speed on each set of 25 targets, whether there was a target release delay to help people learn to stay at home until they visually see something, and then the angles that I were going to use, whether I was using the pick 1 to 10 angles or I was going to use a wedge of the pie. And then finally, depending upon what I picked in this column, then I would delineate in this column exactly what those targets were. So this sheet of paper then reflects Day 1, and it could be employed on station 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, now, looking over here on the far left, we have exercises. We have exercise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's how many exercises I would expect that shooter to do in a day. Each exercise is comprised of 25 targets. So looking in this direction, the first exercise would employ a speed of 50%, 0.5. There would be no release delay relative to when you call and when you see the target. We would be picking 2 angles, and those angles would be a -18 and a +18. And since technically the angle on a trap target is 17.14 degrees, I simply decided to round it off to 18 as opposed to 17.14. You could put in 17.14 if you wanted to. So then looking here, exercise number 2, 25 targets. I kept the speed at 50%, but I added a 1 second variable release delay, meaning that a shooter could call pull and the target could be there instantly, or it could delay as much as 1 second. And each time you call for a target, it will be something different between no delay and 1 second. I chose to stick with 2 targets, so I picked 2, and those targets were again a -18 and a +18. Now those are angles that we're talking about if you're standing on top of the trap house looking down between your legs. -18 is 18 degrees to the left of center, and +18 is 18 degrees to the right of center. Now if you were practicing on your first day on station number 4, a -18 does not go as far to the left as a +18 goes to the right. However, if it were on station 3, it would. And then we went on, and the next layout or exercise was we sped the unit up to 60% or 6/10. We had no target delay, no release delay. It was now a pick 3. We added another specific target. This time we had a -18, 0, and a plus 18, again viewed from standing on top of the trap house looking down between your legs. Then we went on to exercise number 4. We kept it at 60%, but we went back to a variable delay between 0 and 1 second. We kept it at 3 targets, which again were minus 18, 0, and plus 18. Then we went on to exercise number 5, where we sped things up to 70%, and we had no release delay. We had a pick of 5 targets, and those targets this time specifically were minus 18, minus 8, 0, plus 8, and plus 18. So again, I hope you understand this is standing on top of the trap house looking down between your legs, 0 degrees being straight ahead, any positive angle going to the right, and any negative target going to the left. Then we move on to exercise number 6, the next 25 targets. We kept the speed of the targets at 70%. We reintroduced this time a half-second release delay, so the target could be anywhere from no delay up to a half a second. We stayed with the pick 5 angles, which were the same angles in the previous exercise. Then we moved on to exercise number 7. We kept the speed at 70%. We removed the release delay and then moved into a new area that we haven't talked about, and that's wedge of the pie. And when you define wedge of the pie, what you do is you determine the center angle, and in this case I said 0 degrees, which is perfectly straight ahead as standing on top of the trap house looking straight ahead, and I said let any angle up to 17.14 degrees left or right of center at a height of 9 feet at the measurement stake. Then we went on to exercise number 8, where we again kept it at 70% of speed. We reintroduced a release delay, and we kept the same exact wedge of the pie, and that is centered on 0 and going up to 17.14 degrees either direction from center. And if you think about that, that is the normal oscillator on condition, where you can receive a target that goes 17.14 degrees, variable to the left or right of center, and any target in between. So as we finished up on day 1, we had progressed from 50% of speed and 2 targets, a hard left and a hard right for that station. We went then on to 7/10 speed, 70%, and we then shot all variable angles that would be normally shot on a trap field. And that was day number 1. Now in a moment I'm going to move on to day number 2, more quickly go through and show you, and then I'll show you day 3, day 4, and day 5. Now as we move on to day 2, we're still on the same station, and in my example I suggested people started on station number 4. And you're going to see what happens is we're going to back up on exercise number 1 to half speed, although we're going to start with a pick 5, minus 18, minus 8, 0, plus 8, and plus 18. And then on the second exercise we're going to move up to 60% of speed, add 2 more angles. Then we're going to move up to 70% of speed, and this time back off to 3 angles, hard left, hard right, and straightaway. Then we move on the 4th exercise, remaining at 70% of speed. We add 2 angles from pick 3 to pick 5. On exercise number 5, we stay at the same speed, 70%, move on to 7 angles from 5. Notice how we continue to progress. Okay, now we're going to move on to exercise 6. We're now up to 80% of speed, but we back off to 3 targets, 3 target angles, hard left, hard right, and straightaway. Then on the 7th exercise, we remain at 80% and add 2 angles. And on exercise number 8, we remain at 80% and we add 2 more angles, so we're up to 7 angles. And that completes our work for day number 2. So what have we done in 2 days? We've shot 400 targets, all of which have been less than full speed, so we're using our slow speed in order to allow our conscious mind to teach our subconscious mind. Now let's move on and see what we're going to do on day 3. All right, on day 3, exercise number 1, we return to 60% of speed with a pick 5. Exercise number 2, we're back to 70% of speed with a pick 7. And then back to 80% of speed, which is where we left on day 2, with a pick 3. Then we move on to remain at 80% of speed. We this time put in a release delay, a variable release delay of up to 1 second with a pick 5. On exercise number 5, we're at 80% with a pick 7. Exercise number 6, we're now at 90% for the first time. This is in the 3rd day, the 6th exercise on the 3rd day, but we back off to a pick 3, make it a little easier. Then we remain on exercise 7 at 90%. We increase by 2 targets to a pick 5. And then on our last exercise for the day, we remain at 90% and move on up to a pick 7. So we're coming along in pretty good shape right now. We're up to 90%. Now let's go on and see what day 4 brings. We begin day 4, exercise number 1, by going back to a slower speed again to review. We're back to 70% of speed with a pick 5. In exercise 2, we jump right up to 80% of speed and increase it to a pick 7. Then on exercise 3 of the 4th day, we're back to 90% with a pick 3. On exercise 4, we're at 90% with a variable release delay of 1 second, and we're up to a pick 5. On exercise number 5, we're 90% with a pick 7. And then look, here we are finally on the 4th day, 6th exercise. We finally have graduated to 100% of speed, but we've reduced the difficulty back down to a pick 3, where we have a -18, a 0, and a +18, a hard left, a straightaway, and a hard right. Then on exercise 7, we remain at 100%, increase it from 3 targets to 5 targets, and finally on the 8th exercise of the day, we're at full speed with 7 targets. Now, let's move on and see what happens on the final day, day 5. Here we are on day 5, and the first thing I'd like you to take notice of is that in the target speed column, every target we shoot on the final day of 200 targets is at 100% of speed. Let's go over and look at what we're going to shoot at as far as target angles are concerned. The first one is what we call a wedge left. It's a little bit different in that, look at what it's defined as. The center of the angle is 12 degrees to the left, with a total angle movement of 5 degrees to the right of that, which would make that -7, and 5 degrees to the left of that, which would make it -17. So with a wedge left, we're picking out a certain group of angles that are all to the left of center, starting at 7 degrees to the left and going to 17 degrees to the left. Then on the next 25 targets, we're doing a wedge right, which is defined as the center of the wedge is 12 degrees to the right of center, and we're going to go 5 degrees farther to the right and 5 degrees backwards from the right, or from a +7 to a +17. Then we move on to a wedge awl, and a wedge awl is basically what we encountered once before, which is the center angle of the wedge is 0 degrees, and we're allowing it to go 17.14 degrees to the left and right of center. And then notice that every other exercise the rest of the day is basically the full limits of what you're going to see outdoors on the range. So now we've shot 1,000 targets indoors. So the next plan is, and it's always best to do these on consecutive days so that your learning is consecutive. Don't break 2 and 3 days between a day's exercise. Try and do it from day 1 through day 5, where you do it in 5 consecutive days. Then I would suggest on the 6th day you plan it so that on Saturday you can go out to the gun club. Now, if what you have been practicing that week was station 4 targets, go to the trap range and stand on station number 4 with the oscillator on and shoot 100 targets. And do not shoot any targets on station 1 or 2 or 3 or 5, because basically you haven't worked on 1,000 targets on these other stations. So don't get ahead of yourself. Get used to the idea that you're going to learn one thing at a time. So what you want to find out at the end of 1,000 targets is to go outside and verify that out of 100 targets, you shoot at least in the 90s on that 100 targets, showing what you're capable of now doing on station number 4. And then you go back on the following Monday and you start all over again on day 1, but this time I would suggest you do it on station 2. That's the complement of station 4. Spend a week on station 2 targets, and then go out on Saturday and shoot 100 targets on station 2. Do not shoot anything on station 1, 3, or 5 because you haven't practiced in this method on those targets, so whatever you get on those stations is insignificant. And make sure that on station number 2 you shoot in the 90 percentile. And so obviously it's just a progression from there. Then you can pick station number 3 on the 3rd week, and on the 4th week you can practice on station number 5, and on the 5th week you can practice on station number 1. Now that's the whole plan of 90 plus. And I showed you all of this to show you what you want to do to get in preparation for setting up some sort of a training plan. I used these particular sheets of paper to remind me what I was going to try and implement. And now the final thing that we'll do, but it will not be on this video, but on another complimentary video, we'll take this plan and we'll begin to show you how to go and create the exercises yourself so that you can then practice them. I hope this has helped you. This is Dry Fire Bob.